take it.
And we're not going to stop him. Also not going to stop him. Ash Hanley finishes it off.
Jack Bird with his first Leeds try.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Matchday Live, your Leeds Rhinos game day preview show hosted by myself, Dan Hawkhead, and I'm joined, as always, by BBC Radio Leeds' Jack Conlon alongside me, building up to today's huge round 23 clash. It's Leeds Rhinos taking on the York Knights at the LNER Community Stadium. A sellout crowd expected in a Super League first. It's the first time these two sides have met in York in the Super League era, so we can't wait to see what's going to unfold when Bright Arthur's side meet Mark Applegarth's side. Now, Jack, it was a disappointing result against Lee, but it's really blown the playoff race and the final charge, I think is how Super League call it, it's blown it wide open. How did you see just how last weekend's game and the games that have happened already this week, how it's really changed and moulded into a really exciting run-in for every team?
I think it's sort of shown that, you know, it's the perfect example that you can't really afford to drop points at this stage of the season. You know, that Leeds game last week, they came up against a Leeds side who I think now have shown they are bona fide top six contenders. You know, they are more than likely going to be a playoff team and have shown, you know, I think that was a warning shot to those sides that they may come up against, that, you know, we are not afraid to take on the big teams, take on the teams that have led the way all season, you know, and really show them what we can do. And, you know, I think for Leeds, it was not their finest performance of the season. It was an off day, I think it's fair to say, particularly the second half where they just desperately were trying to bang down that door and just couldn't find a way through. Everyone thought they had done when Ryan Hall goes over late on in that game, only for it to be marginally in touch, which, you know, it was the right call, wasn't it, in the end? And you know, that ended up sort of deciding the game in Leeds' favour. So disappointing one that for the Rhinos, but like you say, yeah, completely does blow that race for top spot, I think, wide open. Wigan obviously well in that mix, have been for a fair old while. Warrington have crept up as well. You know, I think it was only after their game against Hull KR on Tuesday night Super League, which in itself is a bit of an alien concept. But
My head was spiralling.
Yeah, quite enjoyable though. I quite enjoyed a Tuesday night game. You know, I think, you know, when they got that win and all of a sudden they were level on games with everyone else and they find themselves third, I think they've sort of just crept up on everyone and now I think probably outside chances of knocking Leeds and Wigan off top spots. So we'll have to see sort of how that pans out in the next few weeks, but certainly makes for a really tasty last 4 games.
Sam Burgess said, didn't he, that he liked it when his side wasn't in the limelight. It was going under the radar a little bit. And I totally agree with you. I think they're almost that team everyone's kind of forgotten about, but they've remained in the race, most importantly. And they've actually got quite a nice run in. I think it's solely Leeds, Wigan and Warrington all play one of the top 6 teams once. Everyone's got then a team in that second half of the table. Wakefield have the toughest run that's handed to those guys as well. So Leeds potentially as well with an outside chance with a few more, with, as we said last week on Matchday Live, a home advantage during this run-in. It really could be anyone's game, not just for that race for the league leader shield. I know that's where Rhinos fans we have our eyes on, but for those teams that want a home playoff, for those for a playoff eliminator, for who goes home and away potentially in the semi-finals, it's massive at the minute, isn't it?
It's huge, and that's all what it comes down to in these last few rounds. When you see how achievable certain positions are, like you say, the home semi-final or home eliminator final in that first round of the playoffs is all important, and so some teams will have that in their minds, but, you know, whether or not they can finish in those sort of 3rd or 4th spots. Obviously, if you're a side that is still bidding for top spot, then, you know, that's not a good position to be in. If you do end up in 3rd or 4th, you know, Leeds, Wigan, Warrington, Wakefield, who've all found themselves certainly in that mix going into this last few games. If they find themselves in 3rd and 4th, yes, it's an advantage to a degree, but they'd much rather have the week off, wouldn't they? So there's still a lot to play for, and I think that's what we wanted this season in Super League. Certainly from a consumer aspect and a fan aspect, you wanted there to be, that drama and, things riding on games as well, which, the less dead rubbers the better come the end of the season. There is going to be some of those naturally, just given where some of those teams are in the bottom half of the table. But equally, that top six race, you sort of feel like the top six teams are locked in now. Saints are probably just a bit too far away and with not enough games left to bridge that gap between themselves and Hull KR. But I think otherwise, it's looking like a really, really intriguing playoff race.
And potential banana skins along the way. Not putting York in that conversation because obviously we want to see a win for the Rhinos today, but nothing can be underestimated from your teams that are lower down the league. We've seen York pick up some massive wins this year, particularly against St Helens a few weeks ago. Hull KR way back in round one. You look at Bradford have picked up big results this year. Toulouse as well. These are also teams that actually you can't disregard. Yes, they're out of the playoff race. Yes, they're out of sort of jumping up there. But we're yet to be seeing what we're doing in regards of relegation. Of if the teams are going down, wins are vital for these guys as well, and to finish just as high up the table as they can.
They are, yeah. And as you rightly mentioned there, it's all about the IMG points too. The higher you finish, the better a performance score you get in that sense. So, yeah, when there is still the uncertainty about who may be in Super League next season, obviously London Broncos are knocking on the door. They're well in the conversation. A couple of teams may consider themselves as slightly at risk. So, yeah, there is still a lot to play for in that sense too. So we'll have to just see, what pans out in these next few weeks. But absolutely, there's no definite games. There's no definite wins for any side, as it's essentially been the case all season. And York, Toulouse, and Bradford, the three new teams this year, who've all to a degree overperformed probably, or exceeded expectations. We'll still have a lot online for them personally in these last few games, because there are those chances of a higher finish. It's quite tight down that end of the table too. So they'll be taking nothing for granted, and they'll see this as a big opportunity to try and strike at what will be a ever so slightly wounded Leeds team.
And it's the drama we are wanting as we run into the last few games of the Super League season. Of course, the Rhinos are hosting Wigan and Hull FC in those final two games of the season. Massive games. If you've not got your tickets, tickets.therhinos.co.uk. Get yourself in the South Stand. Get yourself wherever you can get a seat or a position in at AMT Headingley. Make sure you're watching all the games. Before we quickly come on to York, we really delve into today's game, Jack. Big news coming out of the Rhinos this week is that Matt Lodge has arrived from the NRL. A bit of a coup signing, a bit of a Mitch Garbutt style signing, coming in for just 8 weeks, his last run-in down the last bit of the season. Your thoughts on the pickup of him? Were you interested when his name came out?
I think it's an interesting one. I saw him on the official club podcast saying that he knows Mitch Garbutt quite well, and he famously, I think that the stat was that he played 14 games, wasn't it, and he won a treble in 2015. So
unmatched record.
Well, yeah, exactly. What an unbelievable sort of 14 games that is for a player. But Matt Lodge won't win the treble, but he's got a chance of winning 2 trophies, hasn't he, while he's over here. And I think for Leeds, it's a very low risk signing. He essentially comes in on what is thereabouts an 8-week contract. If it doesn't work out in the end, from one or both sides, then they can shake hands and part ways, knowing exactly what he was coming over here for. But if he does impress and he's a success, then there's obviously the opportunity there to see if he'll extend longer. So for me, I think it's a very, very low risk signing. I think he just adds a bit of experience in that pack. Keenan Palacia obviously out for another few weeks for the Rhinos too. Probably takes a bit of that pressure off your Presley Cassells, your Zach Lloyds, these young players who are coming in and having to sort of fill those spots. So I don't think it's a bad signing by any stretch, and he gets a debut this weekend at York, by all accounts from what Brad Arthur said earlier in the week. So see how he goes.
It'll be interesting to see just how he goes, because he's definitely a heavy hitter, isn't he? Looking at sort of his highlights from playing at Brisbane, played at Sydney, at the Roosters, most recently at North Queensland, played in Vegas, ironically the same week that Leeds were obviously beating Hull KR out in Vegas. It'd be interesting just to see how he moulds into what's been, as we touched on at the start of the year, a really big 4-pack unit for Leeds. It's really sort of set the foundation for how they play. Michaletsky goes forward, whether it's been Cooper Jenkins, Keenan Palacia. Tom Holroyd coming off the bench. It's been a forward pack that's been really reliable this year. Just adding him in, does it not off kilter it a little bit, but does it add something different to what those guys bring already?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, when you look at his NRL record, he's always been thereabouts. He's always been a player that has sort of stuck in teams, weirdly enough. When you look at sort of the Aussie props that you think of straight off the bat, you think of a Payne Haas, you think of a Patrick Carrigan who's a middle, you think of Fasuma La'awi at Gold Coast, you think of these sort of big headline grabbing heavy hitters, but he's always just been a bit of a worker and someone that has gone under the radar from a playing perspective. So yeah, I think he'll just, like I say, take pressure off some of those younger kids, adds another big body into that middle, and fills the Keenan Palacia role a bit. I think Palacia, when he wasn't injured, was brilliant for Leeds and was part of, like you mentioned there, a real good sort of four-piece that rotated in that middle unit with Ledsky, with Holroyd, with Jenkins as well. That was Leeds' four. I'm not saying they've had a missing link since he's been injured, but I just think the signing of Lodge is that comfort blanket a little bit, and like I say, I've said it already, but it takes pressure off Cassell, from trying to do that same job or plug that gap as you would. But so I think it is a smart signing, and like I say, low risk as well.
Should be really exciting. We cannot wait to see him in action when team news hopefully is announced later on and Matt Lodge is in there. Fingers crossed. Moving on to our opponents, York today. We've already touched on a little bit as not potential banana skins. Let's not get too far ahead and be hyperbolic in that sense. But they've been really impressive this year, haven't they? The Knights. They've had an odd squad when you look at just who's really pulled on a York Knight shirt this year. They've had a lot of players. They've really utilised their partnership with Newcastle. We'll come on to a player in particular who was really sort of been a startler of that system. But just what have your opinions been of York coming into the league this year? Do you think they've added something?
I do, yeah, I really do. Both on and off the field. They've again a team that have racked up more wins than people probably expected. They obviously start the season with that headline grabber against Hull KR, which caught everyone off guard. But what a start to the season that was. Beaten St Helens as well this year, and otherwise those are the wins have come against teams that are in and around them. So, achievable results probably is what they would call it. So I think they have added something. I think for fans as well, it's been a good away day by all accounts. I mean, the Rhinos fans will get to experience that this weekend for the first time, but I've seen many a good review from other fans around Super League throughout this season that get that day out in York. It's a beautiful city. There's plenty to do there. Lots of good bars, lots of good restaurants and stuff. And out in Monk's Cross, it's a bit out of the way, isn't it, in the stadium? But yes, they've got the park and ride that takes you up there. I think for a lot of opposition fans, they've been able to make a good day of it. And I think when you look at sort of Super League as a landscape and as a competition, days like that is what fans want, and that's why some of those other trips, i.e. Magic Weekend or the French trips, are so popular, because people make an event out of it, and I think York on a smaller scale allows you to do that. So no, I do absolutely think they've added something. I think it'd be a real travesty if they're one of the teams that may be at risk. When you look at next season's Super League and teams that may find themselves dropping out, I don't think York should be in that conversation. I don't think Bradford or Toulouse should be, in fairness. I think it'd be really harsh if they were to be. So that remains to be seen. But I've been quietly impressed with York and what they've done this season. Really good ground, really nice friendly atmosphere as well whenever I've been there in a media capacity. So they've been a really good addition, I think.
There you go, you've sold it to any fan who's heading to York this week. You've sold it to me especially. Mark Applegarth obviously had a bit of a tough time when he was head coach of Wakefield. Obviously you'll have known about his time through covering him for BBC Radio Leeds. Do you think, how have you seen him change this year after obviously having a few more years to really get to grips with that York team? He got them promoted, he got them to win the 1895 trophy last year. Have you seen his coaching develop in this year? How have you seen his team play compared to that Wakefield team that was under par in 2022, 2023?
I think he's always been a really good coach. I don't think that's ever been in doubt with Mark Applegarth, but the situation he found himself with Wakefield in that final season in Super League where they were relegated at the end of it was just... Yeah, I mean, you could probably put any coach in there and they would have struggled to, I don't want to say get a tune out of the players, because there were some good players in there, but to really compete against everyone else. I mean, funnily enough, they beat Leeds that season, which is ironic. So, I think they were doomed almost from the start, and I think from Wakefield's point of view, it was the best thing that could happen to them, because look at them now and look at the reset they've had. But I think for Mark Applegarth as well, he obviously lost his job at the end of that year. Darryl Powell replaced him. But he stuck at it, ended up at York, and has absolutely thrived. The partnership he's got there with those players, with everything that York are trying to do, just very much fits. He very much does fit into that mould, and has worked wonders to a degree. They were really good in the Championship when they were there. They stepped up to Super League, and he has stepped up with them and produced some really good results and performances. They're very set in their style, and they back their style as well. To York, and that style is of a team that can stick in games for large parts, which I think has been one of the most impressive things this season. Now, it's not always gone to plan. I mean, you look at the Wigan game at their place a couple of months back, where from minute one they were just completely outplayed, and it's probably their worst performance of the season. They still, weirdly enough, rallied and got 4 late tries, didn't they, in that match? So it was bizarre, but for large parts of the season, they have managed to stick in games, at least up until that sort of hour mark. And after that, some games they've gone on to win and get it over the line. Some games they've narrowly lost out. Some games there's been the odd blowout scoreline, in that last 20 minutes. But they do seem to have a real knack of just sticking in games, challenging their opponents, not letting them lie down, barring that Wigan game. So I think, he's made a real impression as Mark Applegarth on Super League, on York. They've got a really good thing going there, I think. It's
really interesting that it's 9 games this year have only been decided. So 9 of their defeats, they've had 16 this year, have been decided by 0 to 12 points. Yeah. It's they really have stuck in games. They're looking to get back to winning ways after a 20-point defeat to Warrington last time out. Warrington obviously getting their charge going up the table, looking to make it break a 1 win in 5 current streak, which isn't great, but still. If you look at the players though that Mark Applegarth's got to call on today, let's start with Cody Hunter. You picked him out as your first man that has really stepped up this year, and it's a great opportunity to talk about just what York's system with Newcastle is like, because he is the player that has worked really well as coming in from Newcastle Thunder and has really shone at the Knights, hasn't he?
Yeah, it's sort of a debate that has divided opinion, I think, this season, the way that York and Newcastle have used that partnership, and ultimately it's a loophole in the rules that they've managed to find and exploit, which, fair play to them for that. I think we'll see some clubs probably do similar next season under more stringent restrictions with potential feeder clubs and stuff, but it's worked for York and it's worked for Newcastle this year, so all power to them. But it's allowed opportunities for players like Cody Hunter, who came over probably thinking that he'd play Championship this year. Now, you don't know what sort of those discussions were when they've signed some of those players, when they've come over. Have they said to them, you're going to start the year over here? There's a chance if you impress, you'll end up in Super League. That may well have been the sell. But he's one player that has certainly done that and followed that path. Came over as a relative unknown, was tidy for Newcastle, was really good for them in their early rounds, and ended up, I think, being York's sort of 6th or 7th choice halfback. They went through so many options early in the season before they settled on him, and I think he ended up sort of in their squad through necessity, through injury, and they were like, right, well, there's a lad at Newcastle doing well, so we'll bring him into our fold. And he's absolutely thrived on the Super League stage. Real organiser, just seems to play the game at his own pace as well. He's not one of these that rushes when he gets the ball in his hands. He's happy to just sort of take the line on. He's not the quickest player by any means, but he uses that to his advantage. Takes the ball to the line to deliver passes out, further out wide. And I think that the best sort of example of his game was that Magic Weekend win over Huddersfield, where he just ran the show. He's got a lovely show and go near the line as well. He's not afraid to back himself with the dummy and run. And he's been a real good example of how that system can work well if it's done right. That feeder system, and fair play to him. He's really struck on a good opportunity at York and has thrived in that environment. And I think it'll be intriguing to see with a player like him what York do next season, because as far as I know, he's technically a Newcastle player.
Yes.
Do York sign him on a permanent deal there? Do they keep this system of having players at Newcastle if they're allowed to do so? So that'll be the question, and it'll be interesting to see what the decisions, I guess, they make on some of those players next year. But Cody Hunter is certainly an example of a player that can start at a Championship club when they've got that feeder system and end up thriving in Super League.
All credit to him for using that loophole. Granted, it's a little bit cheeky, but we'll give him it. But just echoing your point, he's really intelligent. From watching his kick game this year, in-game kicking, he picks a pass pretty well as well. You know, there's a reason he's got 16 try assists in 16 appearances when you've got players like Paul McShane around there. We'll come on to him a little bit later. Ata Hingano, Liam Harris, guys who, granted, have a bit more game time and more used to the UK game. It's a real credit to him, isn't it, that he's been able to implement his style so quickly and fit into what Mark Applegarth wants his system to look like.
Without a doubt, and you reeled off a few names there. It's a competitive position.
It really
at
is.
York is the halves. I mean, Liam Harris, who has been York's hero for years in the Championship, has been one of their best players. He's been muscled out of the side. He's been fit for most of the season, but hasn't played in a while because Hunter and McShane have been so good in the halves. Danny Richardson's another one who they had at the start of the season. He's now on loan at Widnes, but he was another option there. Hingano, like you mentioned, Nick Howe Williams as well. They've got Will Roberts, who they signed from St Helens, who had a couple of games. They've been through so many half-back partnerships this year of York, and finally managed to settle on McShane and Hunter, in part down to the performance of those two and just how good they've been. I mean, McShane, very much does what it says on the tin. We know what he's like now. Regardless of where he plays, he's always going to be that wily player that just has those game smarts and sort of thinks 2 steps ahead of everyone else. That's always been one of his big key attributes. And Hunter, I think, has just settled nicely alongside him as well.
36 years old, Paul McShane, to be still doing the things that he's doing. He's as important to this York team now as some of you'd say about the younger guys coming through, even at his age. To have someone like Paul McShane in there, to his experience more than anything, and his intelligence. There's a reason he's one man of steel. There's a reason that he's been able to play at the highest level of the Super League competition for so long. Is because of his attitude and his skills and his qualities coming through. He'll be massive today, won't he, against the Rhinos? His former club, of course.
Huge, yeah. He plays. He's the kind of player. And I usually hate this cliche, but he does play in a dinner suit. Does Paul McShane? You just watch him, and like I say, no matter where he plays, he still just delivers. And he's just such an intelligent rugby player, and always has been. I think even from his early days in the Leeds Academy, he ended up obviously leaving the Rhinos, but Castleford, where you'd probably say where his best period was as a player and where he really thrived in that side. He was so crucial to them constantly. Just that wit and that intelligence in and around the ruck when he's playing at 9, but even now when he's playing in the halves, he just knows how to run a game and how a game should be played, and again how to sort of match the tempo. And I think he'll go down when he does retire at some point maybe eventually, yeah, as probably one of the most underrated players in the history of Super League, because you look at his record, like you say, man of steel, so maybe not that underrated, but equally I don't think he's ever got the plaudits that he really deserves. And I think you see players like that in the NRL that are just so quietly brilliant every single week. The plaudits they get, I think over here, those same sorts of players don't get the same accolades or recognition, and I think he is one that comes under that band, that bracket, that he's just constantly brilliant. And you don't always see it. You don't always see the work that he does, but the way that he organises a team, the way that, just managing the game sometimes as well. If York have got a lead, he is the kind of player that would just pop up and pop a kick into the corner and just know exactly what to do at the right points in a game. I think players like that are often taken for granted, but he, for me, yeah, he's just one of those that it's just a pleasure to watch him whenever he plays. It's so good to watch him, and sort of reinvigorated his career in the halves this year apparently, but it certainly worked for York, and that's why he is still one of their most important players.
Absolutely, and for a team like York coming in, the first obvious opportunity in Super League, who better to have? Leading around the field than Paul McShane. Coming back to the Newcastle point and the Newcastle ties, another player in David Nofoaluma, signed obviously was brought over to Salford a few years ago. Has ended up at Newcastle, and then quickly I don't think he ever played again for Newcastle. I think he went straight down to York, and has been that winger that really, you look at Scott Galliano, no one really knew his name coming over, but has been pretty solid on that wing, or John Bennison. You've got now Nofoaluma potentially coming in on the other wing. He's got Bennison to push out, but with 12 tries this year, and with a great try-scoring record from his time in the NRL, he's as important as a McShane for getting those tries and getting those finishes, isn't he?
Brilliant player. Has been so good for them this year. Top try scorer, having come in after pre-season, started the year with Halifax, and when they had their financial troubles, he was one of those that left, which I know, having spoken to some people at Fax, they were gutted because he's been brilliant for them. Ended up playing fullback for them most of last season and was fantastic in that position. So, he's just been great, and he never really got the run at Salford, I don't think, or certainly never showed what he can do. But in this York side, he has really thrived, and is a player that is clearly a natural try scorer. He's got that turn of pace. Like I say, he's York's top try scorer. I think but also he leads, I think, in a lot of the other sort of stats and metrics as well for York. When you look at carries, when you look at meters as well, he's got that side to his game. And I mean, it's a mid-season pickup for York. He's been fantastic. He really has. Like you say, I think he's technically a Newcastle player, but never played a game for Newcastle. Was straight in at York. They made use of that loophole again when it came to signing a player like that. So he's another one probably similar to Hunter, where they've got to make a call on next year if those rules are sort of clamped down on. But yeah, I mean, what a player to be able to bring in mid-season and just add to your wing stocks. Again, they've had a lot of movement in those sorts of areas, but he has generally, barring a handful of games, been one of the more consistent players and one that has stuck in that spot for a fair old while.
And I think it's a great point as well, you're bringing up not just his try scoring, his other attacking metrics. He's not just one of York's leading players. He is one of Super League's top 10 players for tackle busts, for offloads. He's in there as well for meters, for carries. It gets through the hard work that we now expect from wingers, coming out from, and especially for York, who are going to be turning around, coming back out their own yardage, deep in their own half quite a lot. He just puts it on his shoulders, he gets going, but he's involved in the second phase play as well, which is as important to York as clearing their own lines and getting themselves downfield. To have someone of his quality and experience as well down this little stretch of the season is going to be important when they've got big games coming. Catalans and Bradford are coming up for them. If he can get over for some tries in those games, get them to 2 more wins, finish as high up the league as they can, people are going to look back and go, David Nofoaluma, what a signing for York.
Absolutely, and he's got that pedigree, hasn't he? I think that's what's perhaps sort of understated with a player like that, in that you look at his record in the NRL, again, natural born try scorer for West Tigers in the years and years and years he had there. At the back end of his career now, naturally, so you'd think he won't be as good as he has been in those periods in the NRL, but still, for York as a newly promoted side, to be able to sign someone like that, or have someone like that become available to them, after his time at Halifax, obviously, is crazy. And to be able to sign a player like that, it's huge for them. He's struck up a really good partnership on that left edge with Nick Williams. Those two seem to work quite nicely in sync. Williams a bit of an odd sort of half-back, full-back, centre hybrid player.
Plays everywhere.
Yeah, can just be dropped in as and when. But yeah, like I say, he's struck up a good partnership with Nofoaluma, and again, they seem to be a real threat down that left edge.
And in the pack for York, everyone looks at Paul Vaughan. He's a big name signing during the off-season. We obviously really previewed him on the back in round 2. That seems like a while ago since we were doing that show. People look at him, but you can also look at Jack Martin, one of the top 4 props in the competition when you look at meters for carries coming forward. He's been a smart pickup as well, and we've credited many a team this year on the pickups from the Queensland Cups and the New South Wales Cups. Jack Martin's definitely been in that for York, alongside someone of the experience of a Paul Vaughan. It works perfectly as a tandem, doesn't it?
Really does. They got Jack Martin midway through last season when they were in the Championship still. Again, relatively unknown player, made a pretty decent impact, and they, stuck with him for this year. Sounds like as well they're going to stick with him for 2027 and give him that new deal. So
rightfully deserved.
Absolutely, because he's just been consistent. I think that's a real point to make. Actually, we were talking earlier about the Rhinos pack, and those rotations through the middle. York, I think, have got 3 players this season who've played every single game. 2 of those are middles. One is Jack Martin, one is Xavier Vatar, who we'll come on to shortly. Paul Vaughan has only missed 1 game all season. So I think when you're looking at players that are setting sort of platforms and that you want in there week in, week out, I think your middle unit is so important to that, and that's when Martin, Vaughan and Vatar have all really excelled. Vatar had come into this season with a couple of concerns about injuries. He's had a lot of head knocks during his time over in Australia. No evidence of that at all. Throws himself into everything, so you can probably see why he puts himself in some of those tougher positions and gets some of those head knocks. But he's been fantastic for them this season. Like I say, been an ever present, so you can't knock him in that sense. And where York have had a fair bit of change in other positions, that prop area, that middle forward area, is one that has just stayed consistent throughout the entirety. Just about there. You know, they've had those three constantly available seemingly, and I think that's really aided Mark Applegarth when it comes to finding those wins. You know, sometimes in places where they didn't think were possible. That Saints game, for example, Hull KR at the start of the season, when, you know, yes, they've got some more players available, but when there's so much change elsewhere, it does help just being able to name that same 2 or 3 players to start in the middle. You know, your first name's on the team sheet because you know they're going to be there. So I think those 3 have been really good just in how reliable they've been this year, and just the fact that they have managed to stay fit. They have been available all the time.
Does that really impress you, looking at... Some people would look at York's total squad list. You look at the near... I'd hate to know just how many. There must be near 50 now players for the year. And would look at that and go, injury crisis or players coming in and out. Does that actually impress you that they've managed to keep, as we've said about sort of forwards laying foundations, they've been able to have players readily available that have nearly played every game this year? Has that really not surprised you, but does that impress you that they've been able to do that alongside injuries elsewhere?
I think particularly for the forwards it has. You know, they've got to be durable. It's a really physical position, as we well know, is that middle of the field, when they are just taking those tough carries and, you know, equally having big blokes run at them, you know, every few minutes. So
not my job.
Likewise, not me either. I don't think either of us would, you know, line up well in a Super League pack, would we?
I would get the ambulance ready for me.
But you know, the fact that they've been able to keep those 3 big bodies, and that is what they are as well, fit for the whole season, absolutely is impressive. You know, that's not just luck. It really isn't. There's managing players there. There's good player management when it comes to managing minutes, managing workload, the strength and conditioning as well. Those 3 players have clearly been done correctly. So it has impressed me, because look at how many injuries there's been in the Super League this season. You know, having players who can play every game is a very valuable commodity, and I'd love to see when the regular season does finish just how many players have been ever present for their respective clubs. So for York to have 3 players, Denise Barmforth, by the way, is the other one. So again, another, you know, a player that plays through the middle.
Sadly not staying at York though.
No, a big loss for them is that. But you know, York's loss will be Hull's game with him next season. But to have 3 players like that have been as durable as they have, he chucked Paul Vaughan in there as well, actually, just given that he's only missed that 1 game. Like I say, a very valuable commodity, and benefits York just being able to know that they can name those 3.
Do that segment at the end of the year where we can rally up and tally up just who's played every game. Let's stay in the forwards, a dangerous place for us to be, but not for these 2 guys. Our head-to-head this week, we've gone with 2 of the props. Jack's already alluded to it a little bit, with Xavier Va'a and Tom Holroyd, 2 real young guns. When you look at, you know, Va'a's only 22, Tom Holroyd only 24. They're both players sort of in the early stages of their careers, but feel so grounded as forwards that know their job, know exactly where they're going. You've sort of touched on Va'a a little bit here, so let's start with him. Came over from Sydney, had only really made his NRL debut the year prior, try scorer on his debut. Was a very crude pickup by York. Was a bit of a coup, really, when you think about his age and where the stock he's come from. No surprises, just how much impact he's had this year.
And he's got growing room as well, and I think that's the scary bit about a player like that. Like you said, just 22 years old, pretty prolific in the lower grades over in Australia and coming through that Sydney Roosters system, with his brother as well, who was still over at the Roosters. So you know, he's from good stock. He's come through really good systems, and you know, that's really benefiting York right now. I think he was a bit of almost a luxury signing for them when he came in. I think they probably settled on who some of their forwards were going to be, and then he becomes available, and all of a sudden that's a real opportunity to get a player with very high potential. You know, there are a few clubs by all accounts that looked at him, Wakefield being one, and we know what their recruitment record has been like in the past couple of years. So you know, that tells you the kind of player that York knew they were signing and have on their hands now. Injury permitting, like we've mentioned, you know, he came over with a bit of a concussion risk, having had that a few times over in Australia, but has managed to stay clear of that in 2026, and that has absolutely been to the benefit of York, as I say. So yeah, he's added some real punch off the bench when he's played there. He started a fair few games for them as well this season. They've managed to again rotate that 3 of him, Martin and Vaughan to decent effect, actually. You know, giving each other, or giving each player decent runs of minutes, decent bits of rests as well, though, off the bench. So, yeah, he's been really impressive, and the fact that he is still in his early 20s, like I say, shows he's got some growing room, and also shows he's still got potential to excel even further, down his career. And if York can keep a hold of him through some of those peak years as well, and potentially make him one of those players that does stick around for a fair long time, then I think they've got a real player on their hands for the future.
That'd be really relentless, isn't it? When you're looking at Vaughan's not a difficult man, not an easy man to go up against. Martin, we've already talked about him. To then get that second punch of there's no break, is there, for any pack this year. Tom Holroyd, though, very similar for Leeds. Definitely not a man when he comes off the bench you want to be in the firing line of when he takes that first carry off the back fence.
Without doubt, and I think this year was a really big year for Tom Holroyd. Knowing that Mikel Ledski's leaving, there's almost an expectation that he has to step up, because if you're looking a bit further forward, he probably steps into that Ledski role next year and dominates that forward pack for Leeds, or leads from the front in that sense. So yeah, I think it was a big year for him, but he's absolutely matched it. He had that period where he was out injured, didn't he? But I think coming in off the back of that, he's been absolutely relentless. I know a couple of people have sort of tipped him as a potential outside chance of the England squad, and I've got to agree as well. He's a different sort of player, I think, to a Ledski and Jenkins and what they offer. They're the sort of steady starters in that middle unit for Leeds, and Holroyd comes on to just cause that bit of chaos. And he's got the attributes to do that as well. He's obviously got the size. I think he's always had the size as well. If you remember back to what he was like when he was an academy player, he was always physically above everyone else. Comes into Super League and naturally coming up against players who've been there and done it. Have worn the t-shirt, have got the runs on the board, are weathered to what Super League demands of you as a big middle forward, and he probably struggled at times with that step up, and really matching and coming to terms with the fact that he's no longer the dominant forward in a pack anymore. There's players there that are better than you, that are going to challenge you more than those academy players did. But a few years down the line now, as a 24-year-old, he's really starting to sort of settle into the role and settle into his body, and show what he can do. And again, he's another player that has got so much growing room in him.
It feels weird to say, doesn't it? Bear in mind, he does seem to just be part of the Rhinos furniture for so long that you do feel like he's still got levels to go.
Well, you often hear people say that forwards come into their prime in their late 20s. So he's still got some room to grow and improve, which, like I say, I think is a scary thing. And I think, again, who knows what his career might look like down the line, but if Leeds can keep him in-house and keep improving him years down the line, then again you've got a player who will be a really important piece of that Rhinos puzzle going forward. Certainly will be in these next couple of years when, like I say, Mikel Ledski leaves. He's got to step up and fill that role, and you'd back him to do it, wouldn't you, as well, on the basis of recent performances?
You absolutely would. Two packs ready to go head-to-head. Kick-off not far away at the LNER Community Stadium. Gives us a chance, Jack, just to round up and bring this off the back of, obviously, the defeat to Lee. What needs to change for Leeds today? Not just to get the win, but to really sum out, because I think everyone's sort of earmarking that Wigan game in a few weeks' time, isn't it? There's the decider to who potentially lifts the league leader shield. Granted, there's a game before that. Rhinos have St Helens, Wigan have Hawkhead. It's what needs to change today for Leeds to change that narrative a little bit back in their favour off the back of that difficult loss to Lee. Not to go back over what you've already said.
I think they need to just settle back into their style again. I think you're looking at those pivots today, in Jake Connor, in Lockie Miller, in Brodie Croft, to just rekindle that sort of connection they had at the start of the year when they were so impressive. I think that in that league game particularly, they just went away from that ever so slightly. And again, they found themselves in that trap of, as we've seen on occasion this year, of almost trying to do it on their own. They are all mavericks on their day, but they are absolutely at their best when they are in tandem and in sync. And we didn't see that enough against Lee, I don't think. There was too much one-upmanship or, players trying to perhaps do it on their own. And that's not when Leeds thrive. Leeds thrive when everyone is in sync and everyone is on the same page and reading from the same hymn sheet. And that's what I think they need to do against York. It gives them a good opportunity. No disrespect to York, but they're not the same level as a Wigan or a St Helens that Leeds come up against in the next couple of weeks in this running. So I think this game presents a great chance just to reset, to get themselves back to doing what they do best. And if they come out on the winning side, then great. But I think the performance is the important part, and just sort of reaffirming what they probably already know, in that when they are on, they are unbeatable in this league, and they can get over the top of everyone. And I think, like I said, this York game gives them a real opportunity just to get back to their best again.
Do you see any changes squad-wise? Obviously, we've got Matt Lodge potentially debuting today. Do you see any other pieces moving around from here? And obviously, what Brad was saying on Wednesday in his press.
I think it's a really interesting question, actually. Obviously, there's no Jack Bird. He'll miss out through HIA protocols, so that opens an opportunity up for someone in the back line. You probably look at a Riley Lum. I did find it really interesting, actually, that in his last two pressers, Brad Arthur, the one after the league game and then in his pre-match presser this week, he mentioned Oscar Brown. Unprompted as well. No one asked him about Oscar Brown in particular, but he just brought him up as a potential option in the outside backs. I found that really interesting. He's clearly a player that is on Brad Arthur's mind. Was really good in the reserves against Hull FC in the curtain raiser on Thursday night. Got a real gallop about him when he gets in the clear, hasn't he? And he looks a really, really good runner. Tom Johnston-esque, I think, in his running style is the way I'd put it. I think I don't think he'll play this weekend. Just given the fact that I think Brad Arthur said in his presser again that he has just come back from injury. He played 30 minutes in that reserves game, and that is probably a bit too little to then be throwing a young player in for a Super League debut. But he certainly wants to keep an eye on down the track. So you'd imagine Riley Lum is probably the obvious option there, and then McCormack is possibly a chance as well, maybe.
Well, there's no reserves game this week, is there? So there opens more chances for either of those guys, surely. Potentially.
You probably look at Lum being the obvious choice, with Newman and Hanley then back into the centres, Ryan Hall back on that right wing. So that's certainly an option. That's the way I reckon he'll go. And I mean, in the forward pack as well, Matt Lodge coming in will obviously, nudge someone out the way. Probably Fergus McCormack could be the obvious choice, given that he didn't get on against Lee last week. Lodge will probably just take that bench spot.
Second week in a row that Brad's done that, by the way.
Yeah.
That not using one of his younger players, which Wakefield, I've granted, probably Zach Lloyd didn't need to jump into that game. As Lee, I probably wouldn't have chucked Fergus McCormack in there either. But I guess that's the other benefit of having a Lodge, isn't it? That he picks up one of those bench spots. Granted, when more players then come back, it fills that out a little bit more. So potentially seeing him come in.
Yeah, it's the game state, isn't it? And if you feel like you're in a position where you don't want to chuck a player like that in, you've absolutely got the luxury of not doing that. So for me, Fergus McCormack's probably the one that drops off the bench for Matt Lodge. The other one I would like to see, actually, and I think a game like this probably suits it, is starting Zach Lloyd in that second row spot, because I think, yes, I will caveat it by saying he's played 2 games, so. But equally, I think in those 2 games, he's really shown up well. He's shown that he can certainly physically match his opposition, Super League opposition, which I think is half the battle when you're a young player, especially when you're a young forward, is coming in and being able to show that you can match that. But I think he's absolutely done that so far. His try-saving tackle on Josh Charnley last week was absolutely sublime.
Really
It was a real shame that Lee ended up going and scoring on the other wing in the end. But the fact that he got back there and stopped what would have been a certain try was fantastic. And I think Zach Lloyd is really impressed in these first couple of games. I'd like to see him start, like I say, in the second row. I think it's a good opportunity with James McDonald being out to put him in there, possibly move Watkins back to loose forward, Smith to the bench, or vice versa. So I think that is possibly a selection to look out for. I'd like to see that happen. See what he's like from minute 1, Zach Lloyd, and chuck him in there.
Well, he did it with Preza Cassell last year, did Brad Arthur. We could see it again. Big call from Jack Conlon here on Matchday Live as we close in on kickoff. Now, if you have not got a ticket, like we said, it's a sellout at the LNER Community Stadium. Some tickets are available via the York website, so if you're looking to pick up a late one at this late date, keep checking out there. But if not, your best way to watch all the action live is on Sky Sports Plus. We're on one of the bonus streams this week, so just go to the Rugby League category and we'll be there. That also means for you Super League Plus members, we're also on there as well, so you can watch us all the action kicking off from just before 3 o'clock. If you're out and about, we know people are travelling for the school holidays. We know that everyone's getting out and about. Jack, BBC Radio Leeds have full match commentary.
We do, yeah, on all frequencies. Our build-up starts at 2 o'clock. James Dayton and Barry Eaton, your commentary team, as I say, on all BBC Radio Leeds frequencies, and it's on BBC Sounds as well.
There you go, fantastic. You can tune into all the action, not miss any of the tries or any of the big moments as Leeds Rhinos prepare to take on the York Knights. Well, I've been Dan Hawkhead. My thanks as always to BBC Radio Leeds' Jack Conlon. We will catch you next time, but team news is coming next.